What's going on YouTube? Kronos here and welcome back to another PSO2 video. So before we jump into today's video, I do want to apologize first and foremost. I have been sick again, unfortunately, with the big bad possibly. Had to go get tested. Family has actually come up positive. So if you guys been following my Twitch account, you would know all about what's going on. So I'm a little low energy. I didn't want to get this video out because I feel like we're kind of close to this happening. So you probably realize that my character is a bit different. This is actually my JP character. I'm over on the Japanese servers at the moment, logged in to show you guys a little bit of something. Essentially what this video is going to be about is the up and coming next 15-star series we have, the Stil Weapons, and why I believe they might be a little bit of a trap. And why I wanted to explain my stance on that and kind of what I plan on doing with my choices behind how I will be dealing with my weapons, so on and so forth. Now, a pretty big disclaimer on this. This is up to personal preference. If you are someone who likes collecting all the different weapons, by all means, you can go for it. But there are some, what I'm looking for, I guess, crossover when it comes to materials that you may want to hold on to for future weapons that are coming up. Now, as you guys know, I've never been an advocate of just skip for the sake of skipping. Yes, there's always something better that's coming along the way, but if you're actively playing the game, you may have access to the materials consistently that you'll need anyway. So this does come with a pretty big caveat of we might just have enough materials where this doesn't make a difference regardless. But I do want to make you guys aware of this, that way in case you are someone who doesn't play consistently, in case these weapon series come out faster than we get the materials together, we know kind of what we have coming up. So the Stil Weapon series. So why am I talking about the Stil Weapon series? Why are we kind of concerned about them? Well, for a few reasons. First and foremost, the materials that the Stil Weapon series actually uses and its relative power scale compared to what we have access to. So you guys know over on Global, we have currently our weapons we're using are Rivalite or Liberate, depending upon if you have been farming yours out. If you haven't gotten up to yours, you're probably still using your Trailblazer / Lightstream, waiting to farm up enough ultimate boosters if you haven't really been jumping into TDVR or anything along those lines, or if you're just biding your time until divide quests come around. Totally understandable. So what's up with Stil? Why do I feel like it might be the weapon series that one of the first times I can say flat out, hey, look, might as well just skip this set and wait for the next one? Well, let's start out with what it takes to make a Stil weapon. So if we're looking at the weapons themselves, making a Stil weapon requires a few basic parts. First off, it is a weapon that you have to upgrade, kind of similar to you did with the Trailblazer weapons, kind of similar to what you did with pretty much everything else. Actually, you're looking at Atlas, and you're looking at Trailblazer, when you're looking at Rivalite, Rivalite upgraded from Novel, Trailblazer upgraded from Celestial and Profound, and then of course Atlas EX upgraded from Atlas and Lumiere. So we're looking at the Stil weapons. Stil upgrades off of PRS. Now, what does it take to make a PRS weapon? So the PRS weapon requires 3 basic weapons: a dim blade or dim weapon, which actually isn't too hard to come across. These have been pretty common over on Global, so this is not a really big deal. An Orc Malice weapon. So these weapons are a little bit more rare. They tend to drop from the newer Lumimex relatively normally. I believe these are 15 stars, so not tradable. But you can get them from I'm not sure if it's the unique weapon badge shop or it's from the gold. No, it's from the gold medal shop itself over near the red light district, and I'll show you guys where that's at in a little bit. So you can pick them up from there. Fairly easy to come across. What was kind of a pain for me personally was the Serpent Blazes. So this weapon, it's going to be a 15-star weapon. It's different for every weapon type. We can go over to this, for example. This required Genbu. What does this require? This required Byakuya. So I mean, every weapon has a different type that's going to be required, but this required Serpent Blazes. Now this was my biggest hurdle with making these weapons. These were mostly just a time sink. You basically just did divide, you got fragments, you got these granny crystals, which we'll talk about those in just a second, and why these are actually the biggest reason why I'm going to be skipping over this weapon. But you got granny crystals, pure photons, and ult boosters. You kind of came across those fairly regularly, so it wasn't too bad. It was just a matter of time of grinding. And the biggest issue for me personally was Serpent Blazes. At the time where I made these on JP Serpent Blazes, the only way to get them were either from a drop or you had to get them from crests. Now, crest are a system we don't have over on Global because it's kind of dated. This is kind of actually introduced to fix a lot of the systems where you required specific weapons that weren't tradable, and you had to have a way of getting a hold of them. So these required Sage Crest to get a hold of. Now, you see most of these weapons here on Global. We actually have these in the unique weapon badge shop. This is basically kind of the similar thing. Except Sage Crests at the time were very annoying to farm. You couldn't farm them consistently. You can only get roughly, I think it was 50 of them a week. And as you can see, I needed 250 of them for a grind value 30. And at the time, the grind capsule plus ones weren't as prevalent as they are now on Global and now on JP. So getting a hold of these is kind of a pain. I mean, granted, now on my JP character, because I'd been farming for so long, I eventually got to the point where I had enough of them by far, and it actually got to the point where I didn't need it anymore. I kind of just pushed past it. So this was kind of a big block for me originally making my weapon, and actually kind of was what turned me off of making my weapon really quickly on JP. So on Global, I don't think that's really going to be much of an issue for us. So why am I thinking I'm going to be skipping over this weapon? Well, it's relative power scale. So first off, you need all of this. These granny crystals are actually a huge problem. So the only way you got these were from doing Divide. Getting a certain rank weekly would be able to get you the things you needed to trade in for granny crystals. Granny crystals are time gated. So I believe it's in the metal shop, if I remember correctly. Divide metal shop, yes. You only get 4 of these every 15 days. I believe it was up to 30 beforehand. You could correct me, I might be wrong about that, but it required Lumamech fragments and Divide metals, and it needed quite a few of each. So it was pretty rough to get a hold of if you weren't consistently farming Divide. It was basically just a time gate. You needed time to be able to get enough of these, and then you were good to go. Of course, you could trade in Divide metals for Lumamech fragments, and then you traded in Lumamech fragments along with Divide metals to get granny crystals. There were a small chance of dropping granny crystals that you needed for from Divide quests or certain bosses, and of course then eventually they added in campaigns to get them, so on and so forth. But at the time it was kind of a pain. So the requirement to making these weapons was quite a bit. You needed 2 of these granny crystals. You needed 200 more Ember fragments, which use some of these Ember fragments to get the granny crystals itself, and then of course the pure photons and photon boosters, not really a huge deal. Then it moved on. That was just to make your Purus, by the way. That was just to make the Purus itself. That wasn't even making your Stil. Then to make the Stil weapon, you needed another 6 granny crystals, 500 Ember fragments, and then a bunch of these modules that came from Divide. These modules is the second reason why I won't probably be making this weapon itself. So these modules were tradable. You could sell them, and they were pretty expensive at the time. So you could kind of just buy your way up if you happen to save up some money. However, when it comes to what these modules are used for, that's kind of another story that we're gonna jump into. I don't want to jump ahead of myself here. Apologize, my thoughts are kind of all over the place a little bit. But these modules required the granny crystals and acquired your Purus, of course. Now, if you happen to luck out in certain content, there was a chance of a Purus dropping, very, very low chance, by the way, of a Purus dropping, and of course, you also need the Purus of your type to be able to move forward. And if I remember correctly, let me double check and see if this is the case. Yeah, no, you could not change Stil category types. Stil category types remained the same. So if you got what you didn't need, it was no use to you. You can see Rivalite, Crass, and Fluxia. These are 2 other weapon series we're not going to go over just yet, but you cannot change the category type of a Stil weapon, and you needed the proper Stil category to make the Stil what you wanted. So not only was it kind of a pain to make as far as all the weapons go so far, you also needed your exact right type of Stil. As you can see, this requires the Karaba Purus, which is the dual blades. So you couldn't just get any Purus and be good to go. You had to get the Purus you needed. And if anyone knows anything about RNG in this game, it is not always in your favor. So we've gone over what it takes to make the Purus, or to make the Stil itself. What about its relative power scale? So that was actually the other portion of this as well. At the time when the Stil weapons came out, they were the strongest weapon by far over any other weapon type. However, as time went along, they introduced redux, or plus potentials. Plus potentials brought the power of other weapons up. And what it did was it brought the power of the Liberate up to just about equal, if not in some cases over the Stil. If you don't know what a Stil weapon does, we're going to go over its potential here really quick. The Stil weapon's potential steadfast might. It granted you a power bonus which decreased when you took damage. Your power bonus started at 16%. when you took damage, it would go down, and your damage resistance would go up. So it'd be kind of a balance, keeping you alive essentially, but you'd also lose damage while you're taking damage. It also gave you natural PP recovery by 60%, which was pretty amazing. And you also regenerated 20 PP every 10 seconds, which was awesome. Also, as you become massive, what that means is the effect of Massive Hunter, or standing massive if you're used to that. Basically, it was you would just be immune to knockbacks. So it would give you super armor essentially. You still can be stun locked, but you'd give you super armor while you were using the weapon, which was really, really powerful. Now, again, comparative to anything else, strong weapon choice. But then we had these plus pots. These plus pots brought weapons brought Liberate specifically, or Rivalate, right up to what Stil was. And if you actually compare them when it comes down to the damage, because of the plus potential and the fact that Liberate did not lose damage if you took damage in situations where you might be prone to taking damage, that either might be a DPS uptime opportunity for you, or a situation where you can a situation where maybe you didn't play your best and you took some damage, the Liberate was just more consistent as far as damage goes. There's some classes that could use that extra 20%, because there was one big thing too, is those classes could use that extra 20% crit to bridge the gap on 100% crit when necessary, that the Stil just didn't provide you. Now, its trade-off was you lost the S4 slot, which was pretty substantial. This was around the time Raising Pursuit was added, which is pretty big damage gain, but you would gain S1 through S3. So it's still pretty useful with S1 through S3, and you still kept the really, really strong S5 slot, but you gave up your S4 slot. So it wasn't super terrible. Of course, we know S1 through S3 are usually dedicated towards damage. One could argue you could use one of these slots to bridge the gap with the crit, but then of course you're losing damage to get that crit chance, so I don't personally believe that it was worth it. But when you're looking at it damage-wise, these weapons were very, very close to comparable, and in some cases, I preferred the Rivalate or the Liberate over the Stil just for the extra crit chance, and the PP cost consumption rate. Of course, I mean, you've got PP economy out the wazoo with the Stil, of course, but it was just the fact that it had all these benefits to them and it was just consistent damage just made it a more appealing choice to me personally. So when we're looking at power scaling, with plus pots included, Stil wasn't that far ahead, if even not far ahead at all in some cases. Now, let's look even further, right? We talked about these materials here, the modules, and then we also talked about the granny crystals. Well, if you take a look at a newer weapon that we're going to be getting in the future, we can take a look at Lightweaver Crass. Lightweaver Crass also requires granny crystals, and we know that granny crystals are time gated. Now granted, this could be completely different on global. Take that with a grain of salt. We have access to more of them. We have things like the mission pass. They've added in new titles beforehand that have given us, and of course there are there are campaigns where we can get things. So keep that in mind, take it with a grain of salt. But some of these newer weapons, the ones that we absolutely need, you can see these require Luminarch fragments, this require granny crystals. Some of the newer weapons, some of the stronger weapons that we're going to be getting in the future, and granted, I'm not telling you that you have to completely skip this because of this specific reason, but they do share materials used. As you can see, this is one of the strongest weapons currently on JP. It is closest that you can get to what we consider your best in slot. Honestly, it basically is your best in slot weapon for almost all weapon types. And you're going to be using part of those on a weapon that may not even be that big of an upgrade for you overall. That's going to be a pain. And the funny thing was, that's not just it. It's not just the weapon that you actually want to consider here in this situation. You also want to consider the units. So let's pop back over to this here. One thing that was added in with the newer fight, TPD, was a new set of units, the Crass Units. Now these units, I would say arguably are the best units in the entire game, but they basically are for what they do. In each slot for what they're trying to accomplish, they do it the best. And as you can see, there is a trade-in for them. Now, again, it's another one of those moments we're taking with a grain of salt. When this originally released on JP, they did not have a trade-in for this. However, down the line, it was like, I want to say maybe a month or two after this came out, they released a trade-in where these units you could trade in modules and some stones from the new urgent quest to get these units. And these units, why am I saying, you know, they're basically end game units. They're basically the best units in the game, and what they do, I can go over what the actual stats on them are. So each unit does something different. The back unit is centered around attack. The arm unit is centered around defense, or defense, or more tankiness, and the legs are centered around more photon points, so more PP. So as you can see, the back unit has 120 all attack, 15 PP, and 70 HP. For what it is, this is going to be your best in slot back unit for every single class. I don't think there's a single class that doesn't want this. I mean, you're getting a decent amount of PP, you're getting a decent amount of HP, and you're getting a whopping 120 all attack. It's insane. So hands down, best back unit in the game, easy for every single class, no contest. We're gonna go take a look at the arm unit and the leg unit as well. Now the arm unit, this is one of those options where it's kind of up to you. The arm unit does give you a whopping 220 HP. Again, a similar 15 PP and still 60 all attack. Now granted, much less all attack, not as high as the arm unit, of course, but it still does give you a fairly decent amount of PP, a decent amount of attack, and a crazy amount of HP. So very, very strong arm unit, one of the more tanky options available to you overall. Something to keep in mind. And then the leg unit. The leg unit is pretty nuts. Now, the leg unit does suffer pretty hard with only 40 HP, but it makes up for it with giving you 30 PP in just one unit and 80 all attack, which is still a pretty sizable amount. Still a very, very offensive piece itself. Between the PP and the actual all attack, pretty crazy. Now, this is the one piece I know some classes that aren't really concerned with high amounts of PP, that are concerned more with HP that will swap out. So like fighter is one that comes to mind usually. Sometimes opting to go something like the novel leg instead, just because of the amount of HP that it has, and of course keeping the crass arm because of the crazy amount of HP that it has. This is something that you could kind of look into itself. But all of these units are insanely powerful, and they use the same modules that the other weapon used. Granted, there's a new module, Shiva module. It uses Mitra for an X core, but there's a new module that's added Shiva. They all use these modules itself. So keeping all of those things in mind, not only are still not really substantially stronger than what we have available to us, because we do have the plus pots available. As soon as Divide comes out, we will be able to get Lumimech fragments, meaning we can unlock the the redux potentials is what they're called on Global, or the plus pots if you're used to playing on JP. You can unlock those for all of your different weapons by trading in fragments for them. So the damage is not that much higher. Sometimes, arguably, you want the other option instead. These are also used for some of the best pieces of gear in the entire game. In some cases, those materials needing are time gated. So this all falls down to how much you actually plan on grinding Divide. If you're someone who's going to be playing 24/7, you're really going to be going hard on grinding Divide, and you happen to have the extra materials, then maybe, just maybe, I say go for making a Stil. I honestly considered it for quite some time, but I've ultimately decided I'm going to skip over it. If I happen to end up with extra materials, I'm probably going to sell them. Make the extra money itself, have money stockpiled for buying fashion, of course, for New Genesis, or possibly having the money set aside for augmenting my current gear even stronger than it is. So depends on what you decide to do at the end of the day, but this is just my take on why I think Stil Weapons may not be the best choice for everyone moving forward, why you can probably hold on to your materials and still not be far behind at all. Well, anyway, guys, hopefully this helped out. If you guys have any questions, feel free to toss them in the comments below. We always go through the usual spiel, and it's been a while since I've done it, so you know what? Let's do it today. Like on the video is much appreciated and absolves you of half of your ad block guilt. The other half is all by subscribing. Both are completely free and help me out a ton. Click on the bell icon if you want to be notified of videos as they go live, or if community posts as I post them, usually about the stream itself. And if neither one of those are really your jam, you can always join us over on Discord, or follow me over on Twitter for notifications in those individual areas or ways of interacting with me. Thanks for watching to the end, guys. I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Peace out.